Welcome to Vajra Body Vajra Mind, a provocative podcast that explores the outer limits of spiritual practice and human development. On our show, we attempt to glean the most pragmatic and succinct bits of wisdom that bring us closer to our heart, body, and mind. And now your hosts, Jed Ward and Damien Abel. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. And for you first-time listeners, welcome. Glad to have you. So, I won't take too much of your time here, but I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of our show with Michaela Boehm today. Very happy to have her back on. She spoke to us about, kind of like motivation versus relaxation and some things to watch out for with our practices that we have, no matter what it is, to the paleo diet, to meditation, and, what's our intention behind some of these practices to make sure that we don't get into a pitfall with them. And then she talked about her new teacher training program called Lineage and Liberation, and this stuff is really cool. It has to do with epigenetics and how we choose our partners based upon our epigenetic expression, and also about liberating our parents through certain shamanic practices that they do. This is really cool stuff. So, we talk about other things as well, but overall, that's what I'm going to leave you with. Also, today's show is brought to you by Dr. Tobias Turmeric. And for those of you who don't know much about turmeric, it is a spice that not only makes food delicious, but they've been finding out that it is good for anti-inflammatory response. Those of you who do know about turmeric in that way may not know that you have to have black pepper with it in order to have it work. And with Dr. Tobias Turmeric, there's both in there. So it's like a one-stop capsule. And if you go on over to Amazon and put in the promo code Dr. Tobias, all caps in one word, you can receive a 10% discount on the product. So we do hope you take advantage of that. All right, I think that's it. So enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody. I am very pleased to have back with us Miss Michaela Boehm. So I just wanted to kind of start today off by refreshing where you're at right now, Michaela, because I know that you have a few new things on the horizon, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to maybe introduce our listeners to what you're up to, and maybe that will get us rolling into a deeper conversation.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me back, first of all. I know this is our third conversation, and the last two have been really fun, so I'm excited to see where we can go this time. So where is it at? Well, Steve and I are in Amsterdam right now. We've just finished a teacher training, actually. We've just finished a complete round of teacher trainings in both continents. So meaning we've trained two different modules in the US, and we've just finished training two modules in the EU. So we have lots of newly minted teachers out there, which is really, really exciting. So that's new since we've talked last.
And can you remind us what the teacher training is?
Yeah, there's two different modules. One is an embodiment module, which essentially teaches people a method that I've developed over, pretty much the last 30 years, but actively been teaching this method for the last 10 years. And it's a method of embodiment that allows people to get in their body, get sensitized to what's happening in their body. It's a modality that works with releasing trauma. You can learn how to have pleasure in your body. You can deal with what's coming next, so calling in things. There's all kinds of things that you can do with the method, but essentially a somatic movement modality. So that was one training. And then the other training is very specifically a training that's called the Intimacy and Attraction Workshop. So that deals with how are you intimate with yourself, how that intimacy with yourself enables you to be with another human, how do you connect via the heart, and then how do you engage in that beautiful play of erotic friction between two people of any gender, right, for the sake of the hotness, right? Erotic friction implies the hotness, essentially.
You know, it's interesting because you mentioned the getting back with the senses, and I've been studying a little bit with rewilding, and a big part of it is going back out in nature and attuning with nature once again. And what I've discovered is that it's amazing how disassociated I've been to deal with the industrial noise, the exhaust smell, so on and so forth. So I can only imagine the people who are coming in to see you are desensitized as a result of dissociating for those reasons.
Well, and one of the big things, and certainly you've just met Steve for a second, but certainly something that Steve's added massively to the curriculum, both in what we're teaching the teacher training and in general, is just the resensitizing, right? The becoming aware of what's happening within yourself, and of course in your own body, which lends a whole other dimension to things, like you said, with the rewilding. It's our intuitive nature, so to speak, or our bodily wisdom can't be, there can't be said enough about it.
This kind of draws me into the question I've been working with probably for a long time, but especially right now. There's always this tension between discipline and motivation and enjoyment. Seeming, I'm a very discipline-oriented person, and I feel my best when I'm really pushing myself. But if I give my room for quote-unquote indulgence, I feel guilty afterwards. It doesn't matter how, spiritual it may even seem, or even conscious it may seem. It seems that there's always a dichotomy between my spiritual practice and then doing something just because of the pleasure.
Right.
And I'm wondering how you manage that dichotomy and how you teach people to have both, because I know I can't give up either. I know that both are necessary for me to feel healthy, whole, and satisfied. But the fact that they always seem so separate is so difficult for me.
Well, I'm going to just give you a little bit of a different thing. Steve's like pointing at stuff there too, because we've just dealt with this, right? And there's another aspect I want to talk about later. But one other way to look at this is when you look at this purely from a nervous system standpoint, right? So if you take it out of the spiritual context, or even of the context of pushing your edge, or whatever you said, like going full on, right, which are all kind of constructs that might be useful or not. And, there's all kinds of dogma around that and spiritual, whatever. But if you just look at your nervous system, right, the thing that makes your body work, you have two seemingly opposing forces, right, sympathetic, parasympathetic. And both of those, I don't know if you know this, but I'm sure you do, both of those need to be engaged for homeostasis, right? Both of them. So there's no bad, this is the fight or flight, we shouldn't have that, or this is the, what do they call it, feed and fuck, however they call it, right? That in itself isn't it. It takes both pieces for you to be able to have homeostasis, which means, in the bodily sense, a certain kind of a healing, a well-being, self-repair, optimal circumstances in the body. So when you do things that are pleasurable, or when you do things that give you rest, what you're essentially doing is allowing the ingredients that can create wholeness. So aside from all the other things you're feeling, giving your nervous system a rest, allowing your nervous system to actually integrate, and not push your nervous system into a constant be, like more, it is a very, very useful thing to do. If it happens to also give you pleasure and be enjoyable, great. But essentially what you're looking at is not frying your system. Yeah. So you can actually function better in the times that you want to function well.
Because the part that I find tricky, so like a big part of my practice is the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma. I don't know if you're familiar with them in Tibetan Buddhism, but essentially around motivation and kind of scaring the shit out of yourself about the temporary situation you're in, and getting real about cause and effect. And putting yourself into a semi-anxious state so that you will do more, which propels me to push myself in practice, which I find very good and helpful. And as I said, when I really have a high state of discipline, I find myself more able to relax. I guess my question, I can refine it a little more. It's often about how to choose what to do that might be pleasurable or relaxing, because, my training leads me to just do more meditation, which is, it is relaxing, but it's still under the rubrics of practice. So everything is practice and work, which in a certain way is okay. But on the other side, it's like, what do you do then? Like, the tradition would say, don't do any of it. It's just samsara nonsense. You're just, feeding addiction and setting yourself up for karmic patterns later on in your life, or in a future birth. So how do you navigate, and the infinite choices we have, not to mention, especially the modern world, with all the things you could spend your time doing that might be pleasurable or relaxing? How do you navigate that? How do you find your heart's intent in resting?
Right. Well, maybe it isn't investing, right? So I'm with you on this one, right? I mean, I haven't had a vacation in a good 10 years. I see a reason to have a vacation because I don't actually hate my life. And I don't need a rest from the things that I consider fundamentally pleasing. Now, do I sometimes gripe about my emails? Yes. Is it a lot of work? Yes. But ultimately, I don't think resting is the answer, right? I mean, I don't think rest is better than work, or you should be doing pleasurable things. If you don't feel like doing pleasurable things, don't do pleasurable things. But by all means, if you want to meditate, meditate. Meditate as much as you want, anytime you want to, and as vigorously as you want to. You can't do wrong with that, right? And I'm being dead serious here because why not, right? But aside from that, I'm certainly not the person you want to ask how to create balance in your life or how to have more pleasurable things. I'm certainly working all the hours that God gave me, so to speak, and it's extremely pleasurable, but it's certainly not pleasurable in the sense of, I'm laying on some beautiful fabric, eating chocolates, and musicians are playing and somebody's fanning me. It's not that kind of a situation. But is it extremely pleasurable? You bet.
Yeah, I guess I've developed a kind of reverse guilt from what most people experience, a guilt around being lazy. But I have a guilt around the fact that I like working all the time. I don't always want to go to my day job, but if I don't go to my day job, I'm doing practice, So my passion and my purpose is extremely pleasurable, as you said. And I feel like something's wrong with me. Sometimes I feel like I'm supposed to have more access to leisure, and you get that kind of feedback from people too, right? I mean, people can get annoyed with that.
If you're doing it because you think there's intrinsically something wrong with you, and if you practice enough, then it's going to get better and somebody will love you more, or, mommy, God, fill in the blanks, will approve of you if you just do enough practice, or your teacher. I think you have a formal teacher, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if that's why you're practicing, yes, there's something wrong with you, because guess what? You're never going to live up to the imaginary standard. But if you actually happen to enjoy what you're doing and you're called to do it and it fulfills you, and you're kind of waking up, just bursting with the wantingness to engage in that, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. At times I practice with a sense of, deficiency. But I would say for the most part, practice is what makes my life meaningful.
Exactly. I mean, it's a fine line, right? I mean, if you only derive meaning from being good or having applied yourself or having reached your goal, that's an issue. But if you also happen to actually have proper enjoyment with that and a drive towards because you're passionate about it, It's fine. And it is both, because if it's not both, you would be further along your path of whatever you are trying to achieve than you are, right? Meaning, if it's only for the fulfillment and there's nothing else, well, then maybe things would be very different.
What comes up for me is, am I keeping distracted to not be intimate? And so being married, I often wonder that. And it's like, am I outside working my ass off on my little urban farm here? Yes, I get enjoyment out of it. Some days I'm unsure if I did or not. Just seemed like a lot of hard labor. Other days I figured out something and feel really good about it. And then other days I'm like, I'm avoiding my wife. I'm just out here and finding anything that I can do to stay busy. So like you said, it's a fine line, but for me, I think there is a certain point of avoiding myself, and if I'm just can be busy, then I don't have to really just settle into my body a little bit and see what's going on.
Yeah, one thing, this also plays into what Damien just said. One thing to look at is what you are doing opening your body or relaxing your body, or is it tensing or clenching your body? That really, to me, has become the only guiding thing. It's like, I no longer go, is this masculine or feminine, or is this or that? Is it good or bad? I'm going, is my body open? That doesn't mean you don't have to do effort, right? Because, like, for instance, teaching, we just finished a teacher training last night. It's a lot of effort, and certainly my body gets tired. But when I feel back on it and when I feel myself doing it, is there an openness and an enjoyment and a fullness in my body? Or am I efforting and clenching and pushing and just like getting through it? When that happens, then I know I'm avoiding something. So the same acts, like you said, some days your love for the land and the love for what you do motivates your actions. The next day, the same action might be you not wanting to be with your wife and whatever is happening there, right? The next day, you just take care of business because it's going to rain, and if you don't bring the hay in, it's going to be a problem, right?
Correct.
I mean, all of those things always apply. There's always all different layers that you can look at. And no layer is bad and no layer is to be avoided. It's just you can tell after a while the difference. And maybe there's a good reason for avoiding intimacy that day, because maybe you don't have it.
Yes.
I'm certainly somebody who always wants more, deeper. But you have to also, and this certainly has happened with me now that I'm aging, right? I have to understand that pretty much when something's not happening, it's probably because it's not happening.
You give so much
right?
permission, Michaela.
Well, it's the only way for something else to arise, right? Push doesn't make it happen anymore after a while, right? Forcing yourself to be intimate, you could put the hoe down, right? And go, I am avoiding intimacy. I'm clearly avoiding intimacy. But you knowing that you've just avoided intimacy is actually being intimate with yourself.
Cool. That's helpful.
The other question I wanted to talk to you about today was, you had mentioned that you're starting some shamanic teaching. And so I'm very curious about where this is and where it's going.
Yes. Well, this kind of, dovetails a little bit into the intimacy, right? So one of the things that I've been personally very passionate about for many years is, shamanic explorations of all kinds. And, aside from doing my fair share of explorations in that realm, recently, I also come from a lineage and a tradition that's very shamanically influenced, because the kind of woman-to-woman lineage that I come from is a very nature-based, very shamanic tantric tradition, right? There's a lot of ritual. There's a lot of stuff that's, transmitted through that kind of a ritual. So I kind of grew up with that in a certain way, and I've done a fair share of exploration on that subject related to sacred sexuality and relationship, because, of course, one of the things that you have to consider is that who we choose as intimate partners are, or whom we fall in love with as well, right, is a conglomerate of things that are way beyond our present moment situation. So one of the things that I've started doing in our men's and women's groups, and that we're now doing officially, actually weekend after next is the first time we're teaching it in its fullness, is something called lineage and liberation. And so lineage and liberation is essentially a shamanic journey into where do you come from, both from an actual physical lineage, from an epigenetic standpoint, where you look at the traumas of your ancestors and how they have informed you, how your ancestors, your ancestry, your genetics inform, and your epigenetics inform your choice of relationship, how you act out your relationship, how your relationship with your parents influences your sexual relationship. How do you avoid giving certain things forward to your offspring and their offspring and so on? And so it's a conglomerate of, the classic psychological things that one can look at: family dynamics, family of origins, cultural dynamics, and the shamanic ritual that actually allows you to cleanse your epigenetic patterns. Because I don't know if you know this, they have found, right, epigenetics is a fairly new exploration, but they have found that, of course, the traumas of your ancestors stay on the outside of your DNA. So it's not actually in the DNA, but in these methylene chains on the outside of the DNA. And it's mostly the traumas, not only, but mostly the traumas that get passed down. And of course, in their inherent wish to find some medication or something for these things, because that's all pharma is about, or pharma research is about, they've of course discovered that all the things that shamans have done for millions of years actually work to clear epigenetic information, right? Everything from psychoactive substances to drumming, to ritual movement, to smudging, to certain kind of prayers, release chants, there's all kinds of things that actually clear traumatic information from your, epigenetic background and from your body and from your patternings. So it's a very cool moment in time where we have the kind of information that's always been known, but in the context of how does it influence you and how does it influence your choice of partner.
Very similarly, we've been talking a lot more about shamanism on this show, not only because of the science coming up around it, but also because of, I think, some of what the major traditions, particularly the mystical branches of the major traditions, tend to leave out concerning that intimacy with our own ancestry and the land that we're in. And, like Tibetan Buddhism, which I practice, it has the deep Bön tradition roots, but they've cut off so much of it because of their, in an attempt to separate themselves from the shamanic traditions as well, that they've lost, I think, some of the roots into the land-based spirituality. And in particular, my Lama tends to emphasize that, which I really appreciate about him, but I think it's kind of rare that a lot of them, they've gotten into, mind-only kind of emphasis and lost some of that. So I'm really happy to hear your teaching in that way.
Yeah, it's been incredibly just invigorating for me personally that we can do those kind of practices in the midst of all the other explorations, right? Because they're very, very powerful practices where it doesn't really matter what you believe, right? Because different people have different beliefs. But what we do now know is that certain kind of rituals and certain kind of processes actually clear you. And one of the things is there's one specific process that lineage and liberation is built upon that I've developed over the years in the realm of teaching sexual yoga, and sacred sexuality and relationship. which is a process where we deal with our parents, right? And it is such the horror in people. It's a process where they kind of go through a series of questions and a series of explorations that's to begin with verbal. And then we do things in the body and then we do ritual with it. But the horror when people start realizing that what they think are their specifics, right, are really just their parents' stuff, right? And then the compassion when they begin, there's some questions in there where people have to feel their parents as sexual beings and their parents as wives and partners and daughters of their own. When people start getting an idea that how they've seen their parents is not in the appropriate context, right? But they're actually human beings who are lovers and who have ideas that were or wishes that were never fulfilled, and as a whole inquiry into what the parents would say if they could, completely unbound by the family construct, and what would they say to their parents. And huge healing can happen and has happened without the parents ever being involved, dead or alive, and it doesn't even matter if you know your parents, right? It's just when you start looking at your construct around where you come from and then suddenly see the parallels of how you run your relationship, it's a huge eye-opener.
Mm-hmm. Well, I knew when I became a father that it all got turned on its head. And you just see that, yeah, like you said, you see your parents as only parents, but then you realize, oh, wait a minute, their whole lives got ruined by me. And you see how their aspirations and individual desires, so many of them get squashed.
Guess what? They have you by having sex.
And that too. Don't say it.
Yeah, exactly. And they probably enjoyed it, Not all people
Hope
do,
so.
Of course, and there's people that are a product of whatever, right? But they had like whole lives that had nothing to do with you, that just resulted in you. Yes. And like you said, some of that, you might have been their biggest, you might be just something that really is the pinnacle of their relational engagement. And yes, at the same time, they gave up some of their dreams and their individuality, and they sacrificed a huge amount to raise you. Right? And so all of those things in itself is a huge eye-opener when it comes to relationship. And then if you add the shamanic ritual to it, you can actually affect a change.
So are you using journeying in specifically, or how are you working with this?
Well, I use a specific process in which people get to liberate their parents, and then backwards through the lines, and then forward through the lines. And it's a whole long process that comes with. It's very embodied because you have to move, right? It's very rhythmic because there has to, all the different aspects of ritual have to come in. It's highly personalized. There's no drugs involved in these. Because it's a public workshop, right? You can do all of these things also in the classic shamanic, sense with shamans, with whatever substances they use. But I'm not that kind of a shaman, meaning I'm much more interested in the holistic application of everything that I've learned over the years and the things I practice myself, which is a combination of, psychology, the play of the tantric, Shiva Shakti domain, and the shamanic aspects.
Yeah, I really appreciate that approach. I went to a marriage workshop last October, and it was very good, but it was missing that piece of clearing. And it really left me raw. It was a good workshop, and I really do appreciate. But I remember leaving that workshop very angry at my dad specifically, and not really knowing what to do. Horrified in a different way. Not horrified that my parents had sex and they might have enjoyed it or whatever, but horrified that some of the things he said over the period of my life and things that he did, I'd always just kind of write it off as, oh, he was doing the best he could, or things like that. And I kind of left going, maybe he didn't do the best he could, or, just trying that on for size. And So yeah, I just really appreciate the fact that you went through that clearing and was able to help release, because I understand my dad was the way he was because of his upbringing and so on and so forth. I have a very long lineage of men in my dad's side of the family that were very violent and abusive and all that. And so I feel that in my nervous system for sure.
Yeah, you definitely feel it in your nervous system, and you feel all their nervous systems in your nervous system. And the only way that can be cleared is in the nervous system and in the body, right? You can talk about it till the cows come home. You can even write angry letters to your father or confront him or whatever, right? Makes no difference to your nervous system. And so far, we have found that the best way to clear your nervous system is through ritual, through shamanic ritual. Yeah. So, yeah. And through the body, right? Bodily trauma release, bodily, shaking and moving and being with what your body produces.
Do you think we have to be in alpha brainwave state to really change the nervous system?
I personally, even though I have a very strong background in hypnosis, I've practiced with a lot of hypnosis for many years, way back when, and particularly in my drug rehab. I was part of a very, at that point, revolutionary drug rehab that didn't use 12-step, but used acupuncture and ritual and meditation and nutrition and very advanced EEG technology and stuff like that. So back then I worked very, very extensively with subconscious programming and patterning and alpha waves. In this, not so much. I'm more working on creating as an environment in which the body and the bodily genius can take care of that in whatever way possible. I'm essentially allowing people to access their body's natural wisdom. And that's proven very good because things can happen that I don't even know about, right? It's not limited by my beliefs or capacity or state of the day, right? It is unlimited by those functions, and it's given to the body and the body's innate wisdom to deal with trauma, to deal with patterning and all of that.
What's your thoughts on integration then after you have a ceremony or a journey, something like this? What is your advice to people afterwards?
Well, I mean, I personally want to make sure in my workshops, in something like this, which is a very heavy duty process, that there's a lot of physical integration done on the physical level. I'm not so concerned with the mental integration because one can see a therapist for that or journal about that or speak with your spouse about it, whatever. It's more, the important piece is to get the body on board and have the body have a continuous ability to self-regulate and release and create equilibrium. And so for that, a whole bunch of actual physical integrating work is done in the workshop. And then suggestions are given afterwards for things to do. And I teach a process that people can use at home anytime that allows the body to continue unwinding and kind of settling.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm very fascinated by somatic work, but to be honest with you, I don't do a ton. More of my focus tends to be weights, lifting weights. And do you think that in order to make these transformations, the free-form somatic work has to be done?
Yes, I do. And now, mind you, there's a caveat. Different people are built different ways. Like, so for instance, Steve, with whom I travel and teach extensively, right, and who's my creative partner in crime, and we spend a lot of time together, of course, because we're on the road together. He processes very different than I do. So he has different requirements in the body than I do. He's very linear and forward motion, and he can process things best when we walk, let's say, right? We go on these long walks, we talk while we walk. That works great for him. To me, the way I'm built, I actually have to relax my body for my body to process something, and walking doesn't relax my body sufficiently. So that's just, there's too much forward motion, too much straight motion for my body to release. So different people need different somatic circumstances for the unraveling to happen. But it tends to be, in general, that when you do, and of course I'm biased because I came up with a whole method that's called the nonlinear movement method, right? So I am clearly biased, but I'm basing this also on, I have extensive trauma therapy training and background. And I wasn't trained by Peter Levine, who is a somatic, who does very beautiful somatic work. But I do refer our students to him, and they have to read his books as part of our curriculum and things like that. It's very, very useful work. I had a different trauma therapy training, back in Austria. But the fact of the matter is the body needs to be allowed to shake things out, move in ways that allow the body to unwind whatever it is that's in the body. So you have to experiment with what does that. And like I said, I'm biased. I tend to think that non-linear, non-organized movement engenders that the body's ability to do that. However, you might find that if you lift weights, let's say, and you allow yourself after the weightlifting to feel that shake that the body gets, like when you really do it in your nervous system, and also if you don't squelch that, that might be enough. And if you allow the shake to happen, if you allow the whatever weird jerks and things the body wants to do, that might be enough. Only you can tell.
So how do you know when you're processing? Like, how do you know that it's working or going deep enough, or that you're getting as much as you need out of it?
Well, I mean, it's an endless, bottomless pit, right? I mean, we know that, but there's a few different things that I look at when I work with people. One of which is the draining of the cup, and what I mean by that is each human, so to speak, has a certain cup, like a vessel, that is filled by the drips of our stressors, right? And they can be fresh stressors, so the things that happen in that day. And of course, they can be existing things that have always been there. So if you've had old trauma or stuff that is unresolved, you might have, a 3/4 full cup all the time. And so then, of course, when the daily stressors drip into that cup, at some point the cup runs over. The cup running over is fight or flight, like full-on fight or flight, right? Before you go into full-on fight or panic attack, however you would want to call it, you have, layers of aggravation and stress and overload and triggers and whatever, But even if you're not traumatized, regular daily life creates a full cup. So how I look at somatic work is emptying the cup. Right? So you can look at a few different aspects of that. You can do at the daily hygiene of emptying your cup of the stressors and things of your life. And you can look at releasing and emptying old muck, right? That swampy shit on the bottom of the cup, so to speak, right? Which is your family trauma, your own trauma, things that have happened, bad relationships, whatever, right? So you can attend to those together or separate. One is maintenance. So meditation, for instance, if you meditate on a regular basis, that should empty your cup in a very profound way. However, in your body, there will be patterns and holes and constrictions that can't be really touched by the meditation fully because they're ingrained in the way you behave. It's ingrained in the way you push, in the way you cope, in the way you deal with stress comes, right? So you're not fully relaxed, the massive martial artist in the moment of being triggered. You have all these remnants of stuff that clench in and stuff like that. So you can attend to those things by releasing them from the body. And how you know that that's worked is that you're less reactive to those triggers and situations. You're never not reactive because your body is built to keep a memory of everything. And, that it never goes away, but you're less reactive and you have a little bit more distance between acting it out and recognizing what's happening. So that's how you know that you're less reactive, and also you know that your nervous system is capable of releasing stuff.
And I was also going to add that I think there's a big piece of just our domesticated living where we're not really doing a lot of variety of movements anyway. I think we're kind of forced to be linear, being in a chair or standing or being in a car. And do you find is that something you talk about as well with people, getting this move differently just because they're stuck in a certain position all the time?
I mean, I personally, and this is very much true for myself, I personally know that if I don't move, stuff gets stuck. How could it not, right? I mean, we're not even talking about the fact that human beings are not built to sit in a chair all day, right? I mean, we're not talking about basic, laws of how the body is built, but just from an emotional standpoint, if I don't feel anything all day because I'm sitting on my computer doing my thing, and then I'm suddenly expecting that now that I'm done with work, everything comes online and I'm like the perfect person for my, relationship and whatever. It's not going to happen. Right? It's just not going to happen. So, regardless of how much time you spend, pulling apart what's somatic, what's not somatic, as long as you move, you will feel better.
Agreed.
No ifs, whens, and buts, right? I mean, even if you never heard of nonlinear movement, even if you've never heard of somatics, if you just get your ass out of a chair and do something that moves your body, you will feel better emotionally as well. Right?
Yes.
Do you think that the Wim Hof method and some of the cold water stuff is doing the similar work in a kind of short burst way? I just saw Tony Robbins live last week, and he talked about how, every time he's in a state he can't get out of, cold water will get him out of it. And so I'm wondering if that's resetting the nervous system in a similar way.
It is, and it's funny that you say that because I used to live in LA, and there's these Korean women's spas, and you have these cold pools, and it doesn't matter how fucked up you are, you go into this cold pool, there's nothing left of that, right? So, and I personally, Steve and I started Wim Hof method a couple of years ago before it became the big thing, right? It was like you just started this online program and you could do 10 weeks, and we were like timing each other, one would stand outside the bathroom with the timer while the other one was taking a cold shower and stuff like that. So we certainly engaged in that very fully, and I think that it's very useful for many reasons, right? I mean, we know that it's anti-inflammatory and there's all kinds of things. So a reset is certainly a good thing. The caveat that I have is, and you hear people talk about this, is that kind of breathing really goes on your adrenals, right? It creates a massive adrenal stimulation, which of course in a short-term situation where you are in cold water or you are fighting a polar bear or you're running a marathon in the Arctic is fantastic. But as a long-term solution, it's questionable, the breathing part, right? Yeah. Because it will fry your system eventually. Right? You're hyperventilating, you're pushing your adrenals to do a certain thing, which influences your immune response and all of that. But also, the cold water has some really good effects on your the anti-inflammatory stuff and all of that. So I like it in general. I just don't like the breathing much because once again, when you look at that breathing, right, holotropic breathing or shamanic breathing or whatever people call it, it's there for a reason. You create a short-term state, but it's not a lifestyle, right? Yeah. And that's where it gets a bit funky. You have to learn other ways to regulate your system so that you don't require a shock at all times.
Right.
Now, it's super useful, right? Shock's super useful for the system. We all know that, right? I mean, they say that if you're a really, really good eater and you eat all the right kinds of food ever so often, you have to just totally shock your system, which will kick certain things back in that make your immune responses better and all of that. But as a lifestyle, it's a bit questionable when you have to rely on cold water immersion every time you get funky.
That was a concern of mine, right? When I learned kind of the breathing method, I was like, that's putting, if you're already like an anxious person or somebody who's has mental problems, like that seems risky to me to put yourself into that state and maybe not helpful. So I'm wondering how, if you want to use the cold water to reset the system, how do you think you could use that in a more healthy, sustainable way?
Well, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with learning how to do this, right? I mean, so like I said, we went to the 10-week program and we did the, ice baths, and we still do. I mean, we still do cold showers and we go in and swim in mountain lakes and stuff like that. But we use it as needed, not as a daily thing. We learned what needs to be done, right? Right, Tumo meditation is nothing, it's nothing new, right? This is just a modern day version of some of that, where you learn how with both breath and visualizations and discipline, how to, deal with your core temperature and all of that. So how I would use it is I would learn the skill, which is great to have, and then use it as you need it, but don't make it into a lifestyle, for heaven's sake, right? I mean, what else are you going to do? You're drinking your mushroom coffee or whatever. You're throwing butter in your in coffee. You eat paleo. You do Wim Hof. You meditate. You do Zen running. At some point, you gotta just go, okay, right? I mean, let's just have some enjoyment in life, right? Because essentially, if you use all of those things as a way to avoid the unavoidable, which is you are going to die, and it's just not worth it. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't optimize your existence, but at some point you have to also just have a little bit of humor about the fact that with all the optimizing of the existence, shit's gonna go down.
I'm so glad you said this, because I kind of coined this phrase, the immortality project, that I think that, most people in these circles are kind of wrapped up in, and we need JP Sears to come make fun of us so that we can stop being so ridiculous.
Right, exactly, in a certain way, yes. And that's not to say, but that's why people conflate two things, right? People conflate having proper skill development, doing the best you can with what you have, with spiritual growth or spiritual practice or, attainment of some sort. One has nothing to do with the other, really, right? And so, yeah, you should have the best body you can have, and you should definitely live the healthiest you can live. But at the same time, you're still going to die. And there's other things that are important. Because when the end of your life comes, whatever form that takes, you're not going to regret that you didn't have yet another paleo-friendly superfood, magic mushroom coffee, whatever, chai latte, matcha, something, right? You're going to think, oh shit, I didn't love more fully. I didn't actually enjoy myself. I didn't do the things that I really wanted to do because I was too wrapped up in looking good. So it's a fine line, and where it is, each human has to draw, but you can't make a cult out of optimizing your well-being and think it's spiritual, because it's not. You don't have to do any of the shit and can reach realization. Right? And some people do. And some people practice all their lives perfectly and they never get there. Oops.
Well, I wonder if some of this optimization, I know for me, is a response to our toxic life.
Yes.
That we live in such a fucked up world. I mean, our life doesn't resemble anything that our body and mind are built to live in. And, to try, and some people are able to formulate a lifestyle where they get out in nature enough and they really are able to do that. But, like myself, when you work and you got 2 little kids, and I mean, you're just, so much of your life you're trapped in a box. literally. And so I find it can be like I'm just trying to make up the little pieces I can because I live in such an unnatural.
And so you should, but don't kid yourself that that's somehow going to give you spiritual attainment.
No, it's just being reasonably healthy.
Exactly. But some people somehow think that if they do those things, one day, whoever the big daddy in the sky is going to think they're worthy, or something, or it means something as far as how spiritual they are, or how attained they are, or how awake they are. It doesn't mean shit. There's people out there who've never seen any of these things, and they're very beautifully alert. And then there's people who do everything right, and they're total assholes.
A lot of them.
Yeah. And so it's just a matter of not kidding yourself. It's not that it's bad. I think it's excellent. And I certainly do a fair share of it. Right? And more and more and more so, like you said, I mean, the amount of work it takes to just stay out of the worst nutritional hell, right? I mean, we're not even talking about anything else. We're just talking about procuring food that's not completely contaminated is hard. And you don't even know, right? I mean, and if you know, you would never eat again. And and the suffering of the animals, and I mean, it's just like it's endless. So yes, you want to optimize your conditions as much as you can, but optimizing your conditions doesn't say anything about your spiritual state of, or who you are as a human being. You can have perfectly optimized conditions and be a total asshole.
Could I give a caveat to that? I'm wondering if you would agree with this, that doing these things can certainly help free up the body-mind system so that the recognition of our nature is more apparent. Yeah, I notice with myself, that fight or flight happens more the more inflamed and unhealthy I am. I'm able to abide in my spiritual recognition more readily the more I do this stuff in a reasonable way. Not because that gets me somewhere, but because I know who I am and I'm not confused.
Mm-hmm.
Does that ring true?
Yes. So I would definitely say that what you're describing is true, right? So if your system isn't inflamed, like you said, if you're eating shit food or whatever, right, and your system is inflamed and you're in fight or flight, you can't feel anything else, right? But that same is true for the person who's just fled their hometown in Syria, right? I mean, they have the exact same issue. They can't go anywhere because they're essentially dying, right? I mean, so it's all relative, and you just happen to be very high on the your needs are such that makes a difference, right? You are at a point where you can consider yourself with, oh, if I eat the right kinds of food, I'm less inflamed, and hence I can practice better, right? But that's a first world problem, right? Right? There's people who are being bombed. They've lost everything, and they're still wide open, right? And so it's not correlated directly. It's certainly true. I mean, if I get 8 hours of sleep and all the right hydration, and I eat all the right foods, and I'm like heavily into turmeric these days, right? I'm less inflamed. It's great. But when the rubber meets the road, you should be able to have the same kind of free attention and ability that comes through your meditation practice in your case, right? When you are fucked up after a, McDonald's burger and 6 beers.
It's harder.
It is harder, but that's the thing to consider, right? It's like, do you still have it? If you don't, all your practice wasn't any good in a certain way.
Yeah.
Because then your practice happened in this beautiful place of optimal, circumstance, And when the rubber meets the road, it's all done.
That's where the graduated training makes sense. The kind of starting out semi-monastic and then opening up more and more over time as a way of, because in the beginning you can't fucking sit for 20 minutes because you're so screwed up. So you got to like limit your conditions and, make things simpler. But then over time, it helps, throw 2 toddlers in the mix and have fun.
Because when your 2 toddlers need you, you can't be sitting on a meditation cushion, but you certainly should be able at that point to maintain that kind of an attitude as if you are on a meditation cushion, right? So all your practice has to be, doesn't have to be, but if you're living a householder life, which you do, you have a wife and 2 children, right? So let's not kid ourselves. You're not in the cave conditions of the Himalayas, where you wouldn't have to consider yourself with anti-inflammatory properties because all you get is a little bit of gruel and some goji berries. So that's about as good as, you're paleo just by the mere fact that you're in the fucking Himalayas. Right? But you're not. You have 2 children and a wife and a job and, a life to live. So your practice essentially has to stand up to those conditions. And if it doesn't, it's not the right kind of practice.
Well, and many people in history have abandoned their family to just do that cave practice, and just ignored them.
Well, as you know, particularly in the Tibetan traditions, unless you, of course, by, birth, reincarnation, whatever, or by your traditional societal circumstances being born into a monastery, so to speak, right? You get there by 5, 6, 7. But when you weren't that, it was assumed that you grew up and then you had your householder existence. And then in later stages of your life, you would maybe go on a 3-year retreat or become a monk, right? Live a monastic existence. But you weren't necessarily starting out with a monastic existence. Would you still learn the things that you needed to learn and apply them to your householder life? Absolutely. But you wouldn't actually give up your family and give up everything till that was appropriate. Yeah. In the classic sense. I think we talked about this once. I spent some time in northern India at some point where all the Tibetans lived. And you'd see that a lot where like guys in their 50s would just, they'd leave their families, but the families were at that point self-sufficient and they'll go and become monks. Wow. I think that's the right move. You right now, with your 2 toddlers, have to apply your practice to the demands of 2 toddlers. Yeah, and then your practices have to be geared towards being able to apply them to 2 toddlers. Yeah. If they're not the right kind of practice. It's time for yogic superpowers when you have 2 toddlers.
Yeah, you do need some cities for that, for sure.
Cities, and you need 6 arms. So, but 2 toddlers, you actually need 8. Yeah.
Well, I think we're coming to around our hour mark, so I wanted to give an opportunity for Jed to put forward any questions he had before we start to close.
I know I was really enjoying listening to you 2 interact, and I know that it's really late there in Amsterdam and kind of under the weather, so I'm complete. I just appreciate you coming on, and you just have such a way you can speak in a broad terms, but it's very specific, and you get the point across. So I just really feel lucky to be able to talk with you, Michaela, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, very enjoyable as always. Definitely worth staying up for.
Anything else you want to promote while you're on here?
I think we've talked about the teacher trainings in length. Lineage and Liberation is coming up in all 3 continents, so that's good, meaning we're doing it in Europe, in America, and in Australia. Teacher training in Australia, women's retreats, men's retreats. We have an enormously full schedule, which can be all found on my website, which I'm sure you're going to post with the podcast. So there's no shortage of that. And also, one of the things that's always fun is, and you will, of course, end up there as well, is like I have a SoundCloud account where there's like 60 plus free hours of lectures and Q&As, and We publish a lot of the lectures that I give in the context of workshops and teacher trainings on there as well. So there's lots of free material if people want to kind of hear all kinds of stuff.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Michaela. It's been
Thank
wonderful.
you very much.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Damien. I just wanted to let you know that I am available for Skype coaching. I meet with people bi-weekly or monthly, and we work on a lot of different things, all the way from shamanism to Buddhism, meditation training, and herbal studies. So let me know if you're interested and hit me up. My email is damien.able3@gmail.com. Hope to hear from you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to our show today. And of course, a special thank you to Michaela for coming on and sharing her wisdom. Always enjoy talking with her. As for us, we're at VajraBodyVajraMind.com. We have Facebook, just like everybody else there out in the world. And let's see, what else can I say? If you've enjoyed our show over the past little while, I certainly hope that you've subscribed to our show. And any way that you can show support, either if you're an iTunes listener, going over there and giving a rating and review, or at the very least giving us some type of upvote, or however the podcasting system works that you listen to us on. Next show, Mr. Ken McLeod joins us for a third time, and looking forward to talking with him. It's been probably about a year now, so it'll be great to catch up and see what he's up to and to share with him some of our new insights. And it's nice to be able to bounce those off of him. All right, so tune in for that. All right, catch you next time.